Hi and welcome to my channel. My name is Ian McAllister, 43, living in sunny San Diego with my wife, Natalie, 41, and our two kids, Emma, 16, and Ryan, 12. On the surface, we were the poster family for suburban bliss. I ran my own successful architectural firm, designing dream homes for clients up and down the coast, while Natalie was a stay-at-home mom turned freelance photographer. Her way of keeping busy once the kids didn't need her around the clock. Our home sat on the cliffs overlooking the ocean, a contemporary masterpiece I designed myself. A mixture of glass and steel, light pouring in at all hours. It was supposed to symbolize the strength of what Natalie and I had built over the years. But recently, something about our perfect life had started to feel fragile. It was subtle at first: missed dinners, a new gym routine, excuses about last-minute photo shoots with clients I'd never heard of. Natalie, usually meticulous about details, had become strangely vague about her plans. "It's just work," she'd say with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. And then came the gala. It was an annual event hosted by my firm, a chance to wine and dine prospective clients while raising money for coastal conservation. Natalie had always been my right-hand woman at these events, charming my clients with her wit and elegance. But this year, she claimed a prior engagement, a shoot that couldn't be rescheduled. I didn't press her. Truthfully, I was too distracted by the evening to worry about her absence. But as I worked the room, shaking hands and making small talk, something gnawed at me. It wasn't like Natalie to miss an event like this. She loved the attention, the compliments on her beauty, the validation of being part of my world. The evening dragged on, and as the final speeches were given, I excused myself to the balcony for a moment of quiet. That's when my phone buzzed. A text. It was from Kevin, one of my closest friends and business partners. "Hey man, you doing okay?" I frowned, typing back, "Yeah, why?" His response came almost immediately. "Look, I wasn't going to say anything, but I saw Natalie tonight. At the Cove." She wasn't alone. My stomach dropped. The Cove was a high-end restaurant on the other side of town. The kind of place you went for romantic dinners, not business meetings. Before I could process what I'd read, another message followed. "Sorry to be the one to tell you. I figured you'd want to know." My mind raced. Was this a misunderstanding? A coincidence? I told myself there had to be an explanation, but Kevin wasn't the type to stir up drama for no reason. And the Cove? That wasn't Natalie's usual kind of place. When I got home that night, the house was dark. Natalie's car was in the driveway, and I found her asleep in bed, her phone lying on the nightstand. I stared at her for a long moment, torn between anger and denial. The next morning, I casually mentioned the gala. "You missed a good one," I said over coffee, watching her reaction carefully. She shrugged, not meeting my gaze. "Work's been hectic. You know how it is." Something about the way she said it, the rehearsed casualness, set off alarm bells. That was when I decided I couldn't let it go. I needed to know the truth. The day after the gala, I decided to follow my instincts. Natalie left early for another supposed shoot, her camera bag slung over her shoulder, wearing a pair of yoga pants and a sweatshirt that seemed too casual for a professional engagement. As the door clicked shut behind her, I was already in motion, grabbing my keys and jacket. I'd never done anything like this before, never felt the need, but Kevin's message had shaken something loose in me, and I couldn't ignore it. I waited 5 minutes, then followed her, staying a few cars back as she wound through the neighborhood. The drive took longer than I expected, leading us out of our usual routes. Natalie wasn't heading downtown or to any of the scenic locations she usually preferred for her shoots. Instead, she pulled into the parking lot of the Cove. My grip on the steering wheel tightened as I watched her step out of the car, casually tucking her hair behind her ear before heading inside. I waited, my heart pounding in my chest. Every rational part of me screamed to stop, to turn back. But something deeper, darker, urged me forward. Through the restaurant's glass doors, I spotted her almost immediately. She wasn't alone. The man she was sitting with looked vaguely familiar, tall, broad-shouldered, impeccably dressed. He reached across the table, placing his hand lightly over hers as they leaned in close. Natalie laughed at something he said, her smile brighter than I'd seen in months. I parked and entered the restaurant, keeping my movements slow and deliberate. My pulse thundered in my ears, but I couldn't let emotions take over. Not yet. I positioned myself at the bar, just far enough to observe without being seen. The bartender greeted me with a polite nod, and I ordered a whiskey neat, not because I wanted it, but because standing there empty-handed would have drawn attention. Their conversation was animated, intimate. She looked at him the way she used to look at me, like he was the only person in the world. I strained to catch snippets of their dialogue, but the hum of the restaurant drowned out most of it. What I did hear sent a chill down my spine. "I can't keep doing this," Natalie said, her voice tinged with a mix of frustration and longing. "You don't have to," he replied, leaning closer. "You know how I feel about you. Just say the word." The words hit me like a physical blow. My wife, the woman I'd built a life with, was not only hiding something, but actively entertaining the possibility of leaving. I downed the whiskey in one go, the burn doing nothing to dull the ache spreading through my chest. I could have confronted them right there, made a scene, demanded answers. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the look on her face, the way she seemed torn, conflicted. Or maybe it was my own cowardice, my fear of hearing the truth confirmed. I paid for the drink and walked out, leaving them to their private little world. But as I drove home, a new determination settled over me. This wasn't just about her and him. It was about me and the life we'd built, the cracks I'd ignored, the truths I hadn't wanted to see. I needed proof. Concrete, undeniable proof. And once I had it, I'd decide what to do next. The following evening, Natalie's behavior was normal, or at least it looked that way. She moved through the house with her usual efficiency, prepping dinner and chatting with the kids about their school day. It felt surreal watching her, knowing what I'd seen at the Cove. Every laugh, every gesture, felt like a performance, a mask she wore to keep up appearances. I waited until the kids had gone to bed before making my move. Natalie was in the kitchen, loading the dishwasher. "Hey," I said, leaning against the counter, my tone as casual as I could manage. "Got any shoots lined up tomorrow?" She glanced up, her expression unreadable. "Yeah, I got one in the afternoon." "Why?" "Just curious," I said with a shrug. "Thought maybe we could grab lunch if you were free." Her hesitation was brief, but telling. "I don't think I can swing it," she said, turning back to the dishes. "It's a busy week." I nodded, forcing a smile, and left the room. My heart was pounding again, but I couldn't let her see the cracks in my facade. Upstairs, I locked myself in my office and started digging. If Natalie had been keeping secrets, I needed to find them. Her phone was out of the question. She was always careful to keep it within arm's reach. But her laptop was a different story. She often left it open on the kitchen counter or the desk in our bedroom. I waited until she was in the shower, then slipped into our room and opened it. Her browser history was clean, too clean, but her email told a different story. In her sent folder, I found a thread with the subject line, "Tomorrow." It was addressed to a man named Eric Walters, and the content was short but damning. "Looking forward to seeing you again. Same time, same place." My stomach churned as I stared at the screen. Eric Walters. The name tickled something in my memory, but I couldn't place it. I copied the email address and pasted it into a search engine, hoping for a hit. Bingo. Eric Walters was a corporate consultant, working with several high-end clients across Southern California. His LinkedIn profile showed him as polished and ambitious, with the kind of charisma that practically oozed through the screen. And then I remembered where I'd seen him before, the gala. He'd been there as a guest, chatting with Natalie during the cocktail hour while I was busy schmoozing clients. I sat back, the pieces falling into place. Natalie's frequent photo shoots, her sudden interest in fitness, her newfound secrecy, they all pointed to Eric. But I needed more than emails. I needed undeniable proof, something that would force her to confront the reality of her actions. The next day, I called in sick to work. Once Natalie left the house, I tailed her again, keeping a safe distance as she drove into the city. She parked at a small boutique hotel, the kind of place that catered to discretion. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly they ached. She walked into the lobby with a confidence that made my stomach turn. Moments later, Eric appeared, his arm brushing hers as they exchanged a smile. They disappeared into an elevator together, and I knew exactly where they were headed. I waited in the car, my mind a whirl of anger, disbelief, and a grim sense of purpose. When they emerged an hour later, looking disheveled but unconcerned, I snapped a series of photos with my phone. It wasn't subtle, but they didn't notice. They were too wrapped up in their bubble to see me sitting just a few yards away. The drive home was a blur. I felt like I was watching myself from a distance, detached from the overwhelming emotions crashing through me. When Natalie came home that evening, she greeted me with the same practiced smile, but I could barely look at her. I knew now that the life we'd built was a lie, and I was the only one left trying to hold it together. The only question was, what would I do with the truth? The proof weighed heavy in my pocket as I sat on the edge of our bed that night, watching Natalie brush her hair in front of the vanity. She was humming softly, an old habit of hers that once brought me comfort. Now it grated against my nerves, each note a reminder of her betrayal. The photos I'd taken were damning. Natalie and Eric holding hands, walking out of the hotel with matching satisfied smiles. I'd even captured the quick kiss she planted on his cheek as they parted. There was no denying it now, no room for explanations or excuses. "Something on your mind?" she asked suddenly, turning to face me. I realized I'd been staring at her, my jaw tight. "Work stuff," I lied, forcing a faint smile. "Deadlines are piling up." She nodded, sympathy flickering in her eyes. "You've been under a lot of stress lately. Maybe you need a break." The irony of her suggestion nearly made me laugh. A break? She was the one sneaking off to boutique hotels while I was holding this family together. But I swallowed the bitterness and nodded. "Maybe you're right." We went to bed in silence, her back to me as she drifted off with ease. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my thoughts churning. Part of me wanted to confront her immediately, to demand answers, and watch her scramble to explain herself. But another part, the colder, calculating side, wanted to wait, to plan, to make sure that when I confronted her, there was no way for her to wriggle out of it. The next day, I called a lawyer. I'd never imagined needing one, but the conversation was surprisingly straightforward. The lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Rebecca, listened patiently as I outlined the situation. "What do you want to achieve here, Mr. McAllister?" she asked once I'd finished. "I don't know," I admitted. "I'm not even sure if I want a divorce. But I need leverage, something to protect myself and my kids." She nodded. "That's smart. Infidelity can complicate things, but with the evidence you have, you're in a strong position. If you're serious about moving forward, I can guide you through the process." I thanked her and hung up, my mind spinning. Divorce felt like a nuclear option, something that would destroy everything we'd built. But could I really stay in this marriage, knowing what I knew? Later that evening, I took another step. While Natalie was out running errands, I searched her phone. She'd left it charging on the kitchen counter, a rare lapse in her usual vigilance. The texts between her and Eric were worse than I'd imagined. "Eric, I can't stop thinking about yesterday. You're incredible." "Natalie, me too. I wish we had more time together." "Eric, soon. Just say the word, and we'll make it happen." There was no ambiguity, no room for doubt. They were planning a future together, one that didn't include me. When she came home, I was waiting in the living room, the photos and screenshots spread out on the coffee table. She froze in the doorway, her face pale as she took in the evidence. "What's this?" she asked, her voice trembling. "You tell me," I said, my tone ice cold. She hesitated, then stepped closer, her eyes darting over the images. "Ian, it's not what it looks like." "Don't," I interrupted, standing up. "Don't insult me by pretending this isn't exactly what it looks like. I followed you, Natalie. I saw you with him." Her face crumpled, tears welling in her eyes. "I didn't mean for this to happen," she whispered. It just did." "That's your excuse?" I snapped, my anger boiling over. "You didn't mean for it to happen? You've been lying to me, to our kids, to everyone, and that's all you've got." She reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "Ian, please. Let me explain." "You've got 5 minutes," I said, crossing my arms. "Start talking." Her explanation was a mess of half-truths and deflections. She claimed she felt neglected, that our marriage had become routine, that she didn't know how to tell me she was unhappy. "And Eric?" I pressed. "What's he got to do with any of this?" She hesitated, then looked away. He made me feel alive again. The words stung more than I expected, cutting through my anger like a blade. I'd been ready for excuses, for lies, but her brutal honesty left me speechless. For the first time since I discovered her betrayal, I felt the weight of what we'd lost. "What happens now?" she asked quietly, tears streaming down her face. I didn't have an answer. Not yet, but I knew one thing for certain. Nothing would ever be the same. The days that followed were a tense blur of avoidance and simmering anger. Natalie and I spoke only when necessary, exchanging clipped words about the kids' schedules, groceries, and other mundane details of family life. The house felt suffocating, every room steeped in unspoken resentment. I slept in the guest room, and the nights dragged on, each one longer than the last. Emma and Ryan noticed the shift almost immediately. Emma, perceptive as always, asked me outright one evening while I was fixing a leaky faucet in the downstairs bathroom. "Dad, are you and Mom okay?" she asked, leaning against the doorframe, her voice cautious. I paused, gripping the wrench tighter than necessary. "Why do you ask?" She shrugged, though her eyes betrayed her concern. "You've been different, both of you. It's like you're avoiding each other." I considered lying, brushing her off with some excuse about work stress or busy schedules. But she was 16, old enough to sense when something was wrong. "We're just going through a rough patch," I said finally, setting the wrench down and turning to face her. "But it's nothing you need to worry about." "Okay." Emma nodded, though she didn't look convinced. "Okay, just don't let it get worse." Her words lingered long after she'd left, a heavy reminder of what was at stake. I spent the following week collecting myself, working late hours at the office to avoid going home. The distance gave me time to think, to process the anger and betrayal swirling in my chest. Natalie, for her part, stayed quiet. She didn't try to apologize again or explain further, and I didn't ask her to. But as the days passed, my anger began to shift, morphing into something colder, more deliberate. Natalie had broken my trust, shattered the foundation of our marriage, but I wasn't going to let her destroy my life. If she thought she could sneak away with Eric and leave me to pick up the pieces, she had another thing coming. The following weekend, I made my move. It started with a phone call to Eric Walters. His number had been easy enough to find, thanks to his public-facing role at his company. When he picked up, his voice was smooth, confident, exactly the kind of tone that made my skin crawl. "This is Eric Walters. This is Ian McAllister," I said, my voice sharp. "Natalie's husband." There was a pause, just long enough to let me know I'd caught him off guard. "Ian," he said slowly, "I wasn't expecting this." "No, I imagine you weren't." I leaned back in my chair, letting the silence hang. "We need to talk." "I'm not sure that's a good idea," he said, his confidence slipping. "Oh, I think it's a great idea," I countered. "You see, Eric, I'm not the kind of man who lets things like this slide. So, unless you want me showing up at your office to have this conversation in person, I suggest you meet me." Another pause, longer this time. Then, "Where?" I named a cafe downtown, a place far enough from both our homes to avoid running into anyone we knew. He agreed, though I could hear the unease in his voice. When Eric arrived, he looked exactly as I remembered, polished, self-assured, and entirely too smug for his own good. He spotted me at a corner table and hesitated, but I waved him over before he could change his mind. "Eric," I said as he sat down, his posture tense. "Thanks for coming. I'm not sure what you're expecting from this," he said, his tone cautious. "But I want you to know, I never meant for anyone to get hurt." I laughed, a bitter sound that drew a few glances from nearby tables. "You didn't mean for anyone to get hurt? That's rich. You've been sneaking around with my wife for months, Eric. What exactly did you think would happen?" He didn't answer, his eyes darting to the tabletop. "I'm not here to make threats," I continued, though my tone made it clear I wasn't above them. "I'm here to make you understand the gravity of what you've done. Natalie and I have built a life together, a family. And you think you can just waltz in and tear that apart?" "I didn't," he started, but I cut him off. "Save it," I snapped. "You've already done enough damage. But here's the thing, Eric, you don't get to win. You don't get to play house with my wife while I'm left to clean up the mess." He looked at me then, his expression shifting to something that resembled shame. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to disappear," I said flatly. "End it with Natalie. Block her number. Walk away. If you don't, I'll make sure everyone in your professional and personal life knows exactly who you are." He swallowed hard, his confidence crumbling. "All right," he said quietly. "You have my word." We both knew his word meant little, but it was a start. As he left, I felt the first flicker of control return, a small victory in the midst of chaos. Eric may have promised to end it, but I wasn't naive enough to trust him. Men like him didn't back down easily, not when they felt they had something to gain. If he and Natalie truly had feelings for each other, then words alone wouldn't be enough to keep them apart. I needed to make sure this was the end of their little affair, and I needed Natalie to understand that the life we'd built wasn't something she could take for granted. That night, as we sat in the living room after dinner, I decided it was time to confront her properly. The kids were upstairs, their laughter muffled behind closed doors, and Natalie was curled up on the couch, scrolling through her phone. She looked up when I walked in, her expression wary but calm. I spoke to Eric, I said without preamble, watching for her reaction. Her hand froze mid-scroll, and her face went pale. "You what?" "You heard me," I said, sitting down across from her. "I met him today. Told him to end it." She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came. Instead, she looked away, guilt and anger warring in her expression. "This can't keep going," I said, my voice low but firm. "I'm done pretending this is something we can sweep under the rug, Natalie. You made a choice, a selfish, reckless choice, and now we're here." Her eyes filled with tears, but I refused to let them sway me. "I know I messed up, Ian," she whispered. "I've said I'm sorry. I've tried to explain. Sorry doesn't fix this." I interrupted, my voice rising slightly. "Sorry doesn't undo months of lies. Sorry doesn't change the fact that you've betrayed not just me, but our kids." She flinched at that, her tears spilling over. "I wasn't thinking about them," she admitted, her voice breaking. "I wasn't thinking at all. I felt so empty, Ian, like I wasn't even a person anymore, just someone going through the motions. And Eric made you feel alive again," I said bitterly, throwing her own words back at her. She nodded, her shoulders slumping. "Yes, but it was a mistake. A horrible, stupid mistake." I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. "If that's true, then prove it." Her brows furrowed. "What do you mean?" "Cut him off completely," I said. "No calls, no texts, no emails. Nothing. Block his number. Delete his contact. If he so much as tries to reach out, I want to know about it." She hesitated, and that hesitation told me everything I needed to know. "Do you love him?" I asked, the words cutting through the air like a blade. Her head snapped up, her eyes wide with panic. "No," she said quickly. I don't know what I felt, but it wasn't love. It couldn't have been." "Then prove it," I said again. "Show me that this marriage still means something to you." She nodded slowly, wiping her tears away. "Okay," she said. "I'll block him. I'll end it. Whatever it takes to fix this, Ian." For the first time in weeks, her words sounded genuine. But the damage was already done, and I wasn't ready to forgive her. Not yet. The next few weeks were a delicate dance of rebuilding and reevaluating. Natalie stayed true to her word, cutting Eric out of her life entirely. I verified it, of course, checking her phone, her email, even her social media. She didn't resist or complain, knowing that trust, once broken, wouldn't be restored easily. But even as she tried to make amends, I couldn't shake the memory of her betrayal. The images of her with Eric, the messages they'd exchanged, played on a loop in my mind. I went through the motions of normalcy for the kids' sake, but inside I felt like a man walking a tightrope, unsure if the next step would bring balance or collapse. One evening, as we sat on the back deck watching the sunset, Natalie broke the silence. "Do you think we'll ever get past this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I stared at the horizon, the orange and pink hues bleeding into the ocean. "I don't know," I admitted. "I want to, for the kids if nothing else, but I can't make any promises." She nodded, her eyes brimming with tears again. "I understand. I'll do whatever it takes, Ian. I hope it's enough." I didn't respond. Instead, I let the silence stretch between us, the weight of her words settling over me like a heavy fog. I wanted to believe her, to believe that we could find our way back to the life we once had. But deep down, I wasn't sure if that life was even worth saving anymore. Weeks turned into months, and though Natalie appeared committed to repairing the damage, the fractures in our relationship seemed too deep to mend. She was attentive, too attentive, constantly asking how I was feeling, volunteering to do things she'd never done before, like handling house repairs or even offering to mow the lawn. It all felt like overcompensation, a performance designed to convince me that she was trying. But I wasn't convinced. The truth was, I couldn't shake the image of her with Eric. It wasn't just the betrayal itself. It was the confidence, the ease with which she'd lied to me for months. Every smile, every tender moment we'd shared during that time now felt tainted, like it had all been part of some elaborate illusion. I threw myself into work, taking on extra projects and late nights, anything to avoid being at home. My colleagues noticed the change, but I waved off their concerns. Busy season, I'd tell them, though the truth was far messier. One Friday night, I stayed late at the office, half-heartedly reviewing blueprints for a client. Around 9 p.m., I decided to call it a night. The drive home was quiet, the streets mostly deserted. When I pulled into the driveway, I noticed Natalie's car wasn't there. Strange. She hadn't mentioned going out. I stepped inside the house, the silence unnerving. Emma and Ryan were in their rooms, their doors closed, but Natalie's absence gnawed at me. I checked my phone, no missed calls, no texts. I debated calling her, but decided against it. Instead, I waited, sitting on the couch with a drink in hand, staring at the clock as the minutes ticked by. An hour later, her car pulled into the driveway. I stood as she walked through the door, her expression neutral until she saw me. "Oh," she said, startled. "I didn't think you'd be home this early. Where were you?" I asked, my voice calm but firm. She hesitated, her gaze flickering to the side. "I ran into Sarah at the store," she said. "We decided to grab a coffee and catch up. I didn't buy it." "Sarah," I repeated. Funny, because she posted a picture on Instagram 2 hours ago. She's in New York. Natalie's face fell, her carefully constructed lie crumbling. "Ian, it's not what you think." "Don't," I said sharply, cutting her off. "Don't insult me by lying again. Where were you?" She looked down, her hands trembling. "I went for a drive," she said finally. "I needed some time to think." "About what?" "About us," she said, her voice breaking. "About everything. I'm trying in. I really am. But it's hard when I feel like you're already gone." Her words hit harder than I expected, because in some ways she was right. I was gone, or at least I was halfway out the door. "I don't know what you want me to say," I said after a long pause. "You broke this, Natalie, and no amount of thinking is going to fix it." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I know. I don't know how to make it right." I didn't have an answer for her. Instead, I walked past her and headed upstairs, leaving her standing alone in the entryway. The next morning, I decided I couldn't keep living in limbo. I sat down with Emma and Ryan, explaining as gently as I could that their mom and I were having problems. Emma looked devastated, her eyes brimming with tears. "Are you getting divorced?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I don't know yet," I admitted. "We're trying to figure things out. But no matter what happens, we love you both." "That won't change." Ryan stayed silent, his jaw tight. He looked at me like I'd betrayed him, like I was the one tearing our family apart. After the conversation, I felt hollow. I'd always prided myself on being a good father, but now I wasn't sure if I'd just done more harm than good. Later that evening, Natalie approached me in the kitchen, her eyes puffy from crying. "I heard you talk to the kids," she said. I nodded. They deserved to know something was going on. Her lip quivered. "I don't want to lose them, Ian. Or you. You should have thought about that before," I said coldly, walking away. But as I lay in the guest room that night, staring at the ceiling, I felt the weight of her words pressing down on me. Did I still want to fight for this family? Or was it already too late? The decision loomed over me, and for the first time, I wasn't sure I wanted to make it. Days turned into weeks, and life in the house became a fragile balancing act. Natalie seemed to exist in a state of constant apology, her actions overly kind, her demeanor overly accommodating. She stopped short of begging, but it was clear she was desperate to salvage what remained of our marriage. For me, the anger had dulled, replaced by an emptiness I couldn't shake. It wasn't just Natalie's betrayal that gnawed at me. It was the realization that our life together, the one I thought was unshakable, had been more fragile than I ever understood. Every glance, every word exchanged between us felt loaded, as though the weight of unspoken truths hovered in the air, threatening to crush us both. One evening, while the kids were at a friend's house, Natalie approached me as I sat on the back deck, a beer in hand, and the Pacific stretched out before me like an endless, indifferent witness to my unraveling. "Can we talk?" she asked softly, standing a few feet away, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. I gestured for her to sit, though I wasn't sure I had the energy for another circular conversation. She took the seat across from me, her eyes searching mine. I know I've said this 100 times, but I'm sorry, she began, her voice trembling. And I know sorry isn't enough, but I need you to understand how much I regret everything. I was selfish, and I let my insecurities and fears drive me to do something unforgivable. I don't expect you to forgive me. I'm not even sure I deserve it. But I love you, Ian. I love our family, and I'll do whatever it takes to fix this. Her words hung in the air, raw and vulnerable. For the first time, I believed she meant them, but belief wasn't enough to erase what had been done. I don't know if I can forgive you, I said finally, my voice steady but cold. I don't know if I want to. She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. I can't blame you for that. We sat in silence for a long moment, the sound of waves crashing against the cliffs filling the void. I thought about all the years we'd spent together, the moments of joy and pain that had shaped our life. I thought about the kids, about the future they deserved, and about the man I wanted to be. I don't want to make any promises I can't keep, I said eventually. But I'm willing to try. For the kids. For us. If there's anything left to salvage, we'll find it. Her relief was palpable, her shoulders sagging as though a weight had been lifted. Thank you, she whispered. But I need time, I added quickly, holding up a hand to stop her from getting ahead of herself. And I need to know that you're committed to rebuilding this. Because if you're not, if there's even a shred of doubt in your mind, then it's over. I'm committed, she said firmly, her voice resolute. I swear to you, Ian, I'm all in. We began the process slowly, like strangers learning how to coexist. Counseling sessions became a weekly routine, and though they were often tense and uncomfortable, they forced us to confront the truths we'd avoided for years. Natalie opened up about her feelings of isolation, her fear of losing her identity as a person outside of being a wife and mother. I spoke about my own failures, my tendency to bury myself in work, my blindness to the cracks in our marriage. The kids noticed a shift almost immediately. Emma started spending more time at home, her walls coming down little by little. Ryan, always the more stoic of the two, still held back, but he didn't flinch when I hugged him or ruffled his hair. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Yet, even as we worked to rebuild, the doubt lingered. I couldn't shake the images of Natalie and Eric from my mind, the betrayal replaying in my thoughts at the most unexpected times. There were nights when I lay awake, wondering if I was making a mistake, if trying to repair something so broken was an act of futility. And then, one day, a package arrived at our door, a manila envelope addressed to me with no return address. Inside was a single photograph, Natalie and Eric walking hand in hand outside the cove. The note attached read, "Just in case you forgot." I stared at the photo, my chest tightening. The past was trying to claw its way back into the present, and I wasn't sure if I had the strength to fight it. I folded the photo and slipped it back into the envelope, my mind racing. Who had sent it? Eric? Someone else who knew? Or was it the universe reminding me that no matter how hard I tried, some things could never truly be erased? I stared at the envelope on my desk for hours that night, the weight of its contents bearing down on me like a stone. The photograph was a cruel reminder of everything I was trying to move past, but it was the note that truly rattled me. Just in case you forgot, it wasn't just a message. It was a taunt, a ghost clawing its way back into my life, threatening to undo the fragile progress we'd made. Natalie was in the living room, curled up on the couch with a book. She hadn't noticed the package or my growing agitation, but I couldn't keep it from her. Not if we were truly going to rebuild. "Natalie," I called, my voice steady but cold. "Can you come here?" She appeared in the doorway a moment later, her expression curious but cautious. "What's up?" I slid the envelope across the desk toward her. "This came in the mail today." Her eyes flicked to the envelope, then back to me, confusion flickering across her face. She opened it carefully, her hands trembling as she pulled out the photograph and note. The moment she saw what it was, her face drained of color. "Who sent this?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I was hoping you could tell me," I said, my tone sharper than I intended. "I don't know," she said quickly, her eyes wide with panic. "Ian, I swear, I have no idea who would do this." I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. "You think it's Eric?" She shook her head vehemently. "No, I haven't spoken to him since we ended things. You can check my phone, my email. Anything. He's out of my life. Her desperation was convincing, but the seeds of doubt had already been planted. If it's not him, then who? Someone else who knew about the affair? A friend? A colleague? I don't know, she repeated, tears spilling down her cheeks. Why would anyone do this now? We've been trying so hard to move forward. Have we? I interrupted, my voice rising. Because every time I look at you, all I can see is this. I jabbed a finger at the photo, the image burning into my mind all over again. Natalie crumpled into the chair across from me, her face buried in her hands. I can't undo what I did, Ian, she sobbed. I've done everything you asked. Counseling, cutting Eric out of my life, being transparent, but it's never going to be enough for you, is it? I stared at her, my anger battling with a deep, aching sadness. I don't know, I said quietly. Maybe it's not. She looked up at me, her eyes red and swollen. Then what are we doing? If you can't forgive me, if you can't move past this, then what's the point? Do you want a divorce? Is that what you're waiting for? The word hung in the air, heavy and final. Divorce. It had crossed my mind 1,000 times, but hearing her say it aloud made it feel real in a way that terrified me. I don't know what I want, I admitted, my voice cracking. I thought I did, but this, I gestured to the envelope. This changes everything. She nodded slowly, wiping her tears. I'll leave if that's what you need. I'll take the kids and stay with my sister for a while, give you space to figure out what you want. The thought of her leaving, of the kids being uprooted, twisted something in my chest. No, I said firmly. They stay here. We'll tell them whatever we have to, but I won't have them dragged into this mess any more than they already are. Natalie swallowed hard, her composure cracking again. What about us? I don't know, I said honestly. But I need time, and I need to figure out who sent this. The next day, I took the envelope to a private investigator. His name was Joel, a wiry man in his 50s with a no-nonsense demeanor that inspired immediate confidence. Could be anyone, he said after I explained the situation. Ex-lover, jealous friend, someone with an axe to grind. People love to stir the pot when they see an opening. How do we find out? I asked. Joel leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. I'll start with Eric Walters. If he's clean, I'll work outward, friends, acquaintances, anyone with a motive. It'll take time, though. Do it, I said. I need to know. As I left his office, my phone buzzed with a text from Natalie. Can we talk tonight? I think we owe it to the kids to have a plan. I stared at the message, the weight of the decision looming over me. The kids deserved stability, but I wasn't sure if I could give it to them. Not with the storm still raging inside me. For now, all I could do was wait. Wait for answers, wait for clarity, and hope that, somehow, I'd find a way to rebuild what had been broken, or the strength to walk away. The photograph sat on my desk for days, taunting me. Its very presence felt like a ticking time bomb, a reminder that no matter how much progress Natalie and I seemed to make, there were forces outside our control ready to tear it all apart. I didn't mention it to her. Not immediately. I wasn't sure if I wanted to know her reaction or if I was bracing for another lie. Instead, I began watching her again, not following her like before, but observing her at home, during counseling, and even in the small, vulnerable moments when she thought no one was looking. She seemed genuine in her efforts to repair our relationship. The phone stayed on the counter. Emails were left open for anyone to see, and she went out of her way to reassure me of her intentions. But the photograph made me question everything. Whoever sent, it had an agenda. And if it wasn't Eric, that meant someone else had been watching, someone who wanted to ensure I didn't forget. My mind spun with possibilities, none of them comforting. 2 weeks later, the envelope slipped my mind for a brief moment, until another one arrived. This time, the contents were worse. A short video clip on a USB drive. I hesitated before plugging it into my laptop, the knot in my stomach tightening as I clicked the file. The video was grainy, clearly taken from a distance, but unmistakable. Natalie and Eric, sitting in his car, parked near what appeared to be the same boutique hotel. Their conversation was inaudible, but their body language said everything. She leaned in close, her hand resting on his knee, her lips brushing his ear. The timestamp was from 3 months ago, well before our confrontation, but not so long ago that it felt irrelevant. Whoever was sending these had access to parts of our life I thought were buried. They wanted me to remember, to question if the rebuilding process was worth it. This time, I didn't wait. I confronted Natalie the moment she walked through the door. Who sent this? I demanded, tossing the USB drive onto the coffee table. Her eyes widened, and she glanced from the drive to me. Confusion etched across her face. What is it? Watch it, I said, my voice sharp. She hesitated but did as I said. As the video played, her face went pale, and she pressed a hand to her mouth. I don't. Save it, I snapped, cutting her off. I'm not interested in excuses. Someone's sending this to me, Natalie. Someone who knows exactly what happened. Tears filled her eyes, but I couldn't tell if they were genuine or another performance. I haven't spoken to Eric since we ended it. I swear. And I'm supposed to believe that? When this, I gestured to the screen, is the proof of how well you lied before. She sank onto the couch, her head in her hands. I don't know who's doing this, she said, her voice trembling. But I swear to you, Ian, it isn't me. It isn't Eric. I have no idea. Then who? I demanded, because it's clear someone doesn't want me to forget. She looked up at me, her tear-streaked face a mask of desperation. Maybe it's him, she said quietly. Someone from his life who found out about us. Or someone from yours trying to hurt you. I shook my head, pacing the room. It doesn't matter who. What matters is this. This is our life now, Natalie. Secrets and surveillance. Someone pulling strings to keep us on edge. She stood, reaching for my hand. It doesn't have to be, she said softly. We can rise above it. Whoever's doing this, they want to break us. But we don't have to let them win. Her words hit me harder than I expected. She was right about one thing. Whoever was behind this wanted to see us fall apart. But could I rise above something I wasn't sure I wanted to fix in the first place? I pulled my hand away, the bitterness surging again. I'm not the one who broke us, I said. That was you. She flinched but didn't respond. That night, I locked the second envelope away in my office drawer, alongside the first. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. Who was watching us? And why? The next morning, I made a decision. If someone was trying to manipulate me, I needed to know who and what their endgame was. I called in a favor from an old college friend, a tech-savvy investigator who owed me more than a few drinks. Jake, I said when he picked up, I need your help. It's personal. Say no more, he replied. Tell me what you've got. I told him everything. The envelopes, the photos, the video. By the time I was done, he let out a low whistle. Sounds like someone's got a grudge, he said. Send me the materials. I'll see what I can dig up. As I ended the call, a new thought crept into my mind, one I hadn't dared consider before. What if the person pulling the strings wasn't some outside force? What if the real betrayal was even closer than I thought? The days that followed were consumed by paranoia and doubt. I sent Jake everything, the photos, the video, even the envelopes they came in. If there was any traceable clue, I trusted him to find it. Meanwhile, Natalie and I moved through the house like ghosts, our interactions limited to tense silences and obligatory discussions about the kids. But something about her behavior unsettled me. She seemed nervous, jumpy even, as if she was waiting for another shoe to drop. Part of me wondered if she knew more than she was letting on. Was she truly committed to repairing our marriage? Or was she playing a long game, hoping I'd get tired of fighting and let everything slide? Jake called a week later, his voice serious. Ian, I've got something. What did you find? I asked, gripping the phone tightly. The materials you sent me? They were mailed from a P.O. box registered under the name Eric Walters. My stomach dropped. Eric, it gets better, Jake continued. The surveillance, the photos, and the video, that wasn't just someone casually snapping pictures. It was professional grade. Whoever recorded this was watching both of you for a while. I'm guessing Eric hired someone to cover his tracks in case things went south. I leaned back in my chair, the pieces clicking into place. Eric hadn't just been sneaking around with my wife. He'd been documenting it, likely to use as leverage if the affair ever became public. But why send the evidence to me? Was it some kind of twisted apology? A way to absolve himself by forcing me to confront the truth again and again? Anything else? I asked. There's one more thing, Jake said. Eric's been out of the picture for months, longer than you think. He relocated to New York in January. Whoever mailed these did it recently, but they used his old credentials. That means someone else has access to his stuff. Someone else? I asked, the unease in my chest tightening. Oh, that's what I'm working on, Jake said. But if I had to guess, it's someone close to him. Or to you. The call ended, and I sat there in silence, the weight of his words sinking in. Someone close to me. Someone who knew enough about the affair to keep the flames alive. But who? Natalie? No, she wouldn't sabotage herself like this. The kids? Impossible. That left one glaring possibility. Someone outside the family, but close enough to want to destroy us. That evening, Natalie walked into the kitchen as I poured myself a drink. I glanced up, watching her carefully. She hesitated at the door, then stepped inside, her movements tentative. "We need to talk," she said. "About what?" I asked, taking a sip. "About all of this." She gestured vaguely, her voice trembling. "The envelopes, the videos, everything. I can't keep living like this, Ian. I know I messed up, but I don't deserve this. Neither of us does." I set the glass down, my gaze hard. "Then tell me the truth," I said. "All of it." "I have told you the truth," she said, her voice rising. "I ended things with Eric months ago. I haven't spoken to him since. I don't know who's doing this or why, but I swear to you, it's not me." Her desperation felt real, but my instincts told me there was more to the story. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. It was Jake. "Hey," I said, turning away from Natalie. "I've got the name," Jake said. "The person who's been mailing you the evidence? It's Amanda Foster." I froze. Amanda was Natalie's best friend, the one person who'd been by her side through everything, who'd helped her cover her tracks during the affair. "Why?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "That's the million-dollar question," Jake replied. "But from what I've pieced together, it looks like she's been in contact with Eric, possibly even working with him. My guess? She's jealous. She wanted Eric for herself, and when that didn't pan out, she decided to burn everything to the ground." I ended the call, my mind racing. Natalie was watching me, her expression a mix of confusion and fear. "It was Amanda," I said finally. Her eyes widened. "What? No, that's not possible." "It is," I said, my voice cold. "She knew everything about your affair, didn't she? She helped you hide it, but when Eric didn't choose her, she decided to make you pay." Natalie collapsed into a chair, her hands trembling. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Why would she do this to me?" "Because she could," I said, the bitterness spilling out. "Because she's as selfish as you were." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The truth was out, but it didn't feel like a victory. The damage had been done, and there was no going back. In the end, Natalie and I agreed on a trial separation. The kids took the news hard, but I reassured them it wasn't their fault. Natalie moved in with her sister, while I stayed in the house, trying to pick up the pieces of what remained. As for Amanda, I confronted her once, though it brought little satisfaction. She denied everything at first, but her guilt was obvious. In the end, she was as broken as the rest of us, another casualty of selfishness and deceit. I didn't know what the future held, but one thing was clear. The life I'd known was over. And maybe that was for the best. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe. New cheating wife stories tomorrow. Goodbye.